Hello and welcome to Property Matters. 40 minutes of lively chat and debate around all matters property, designed to be of interest to everyone who has an interest in the property market. Property Matters is supported by Fairview International and also Town & Country Property Auctions London. We have some really interesting topics for discussion this morning, and as always we'd welcome your thoughts in the comments below the video, of course, and if you'd like to put those comments in there for us, they will appear on the screen and we'll be able to interact with you on the programme, which would be wonderful. Alternatively, if you'd like to email us, particularly about future subjects on the show, then our email address is propertymatterstv@gmail.com. And as always, our resident property expert is with us, Joe Joshi. Good morning.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning to our lovely audience. Just a quick thank you before we start our weekly program of all the nice comments and the feedback that I've been receiving myself, Paul. How people have found it quite interesting, and the sort of the casual chit chat that we seem to have, which actually resonates with them in a more layman term than trying to be sort of too scientific, which is part of the idea here. And so yeah, I'll always welcome your comments, any thoughts, and any feedback is extremely welcome.
Good. Well, let's get into our news of the week. And actually, we're just going to recap a little bit because we did have some technical issues last week, as regular viewers will know. But we were talking about the Help to Buy scheme, which is the Chancellor's new scheme to help people get on the property market ladder. And anything between 25% and 75% of the home's value can be shared with a shared ownership scheme. And just thought we'd go over some of the details for qualification here, Joe, because you can earn up to £80,000 a year outside London as a family to qualify. So your family income needs to be 80,000 or less outside of London, and indeed 90,000 inside of London. You obviously have to be a first-time buyer to get onto the scheme. So I was quite surprised, Joe, that that's as generous as it is.
Yes, I think, I mean, the task here really is to encourage first-time buyers to get on that ladder and start to sort of consider the purchase of their first property. Whilst 80,000 is quite a high sum, what people must bear in mind is that whilst it's a first-time buyer, it can be a couple or a joint application as first-time buyers, and potentially maybe even supported by another member, providing that they are not in the frame at the beginning. So do consider that very, very seriously. It's a great opportunity for first-time buyers, and I wanted to sort of really bring that back in because, again, just due to a few technical issues, people wanted to look at that. So the government on the 16th of December this year are launching a new scheme on a Help to Buy basis, and that is that they are prepared to stump up 20% as long as you stump up 5% on a first-time purchase. And of course, that is a separate to the shared ownership scheme that also allows you to buy that through some of the housing association schemes that they actually offer as well. So I think it's a great time for all of the younger people to consider their first step on the ladder, and try and see that that they can actually start their journey on home ownership.
There's been quite a lot of TV coverage recently on these first-time buyers, particularly where there's a leasehold arrangement in place for flats, and in particular talking about cladding, but even just down to service charge. So I think one of the things that's important to mention as well is to really check the legalese on these first-time buyers, because there are some horrendous stories going around about charges that are ramping out of all proportion, Joe.
That's absolutely true, Paul. And when you look at the charges that are involved, there are two basic costs that normally involve ground rent. The ground rent is payable to a freeholder on the basis that they actually don't own the freehold building. So it should be in proportion to all that are in the block. The service charge should and would only apply depending on the providing that they're doing. Now, some cases Some flats may be owned, they own the share of the freehold. So some people will actually just say, okay, well, let's say there's 10 flats in a block, they may own 1/10 of it as the freehold. And those are obviously quite good and good and attractive as far as I'm concerned for people to own the share of the freehold. But where not, do check your service charges, and you can obviously have that adjusted. Normally they're set in stone from the beginning, but always thoroughly check and challenge where they are charging, because some management companies will just do it because they've got the right to do it as part of the lease. As you rightly say, make sure that the lawyers have looked into it and you have been advised correctly. And sometimes it's probably just as easier to protect yourself with the appropriate insurance policies in the long run. And again, take advice on that as well.
I mean, you can understand why cynics might say that this is just another way for the companies to have another revenue stream, because it seems, certainly from the comments that some of the programs have been covering, that this is how they're going to make more money out of low-income purchasers, is by putting up an annual charge quite extortionately every year.
I think that applies in most things, Paul, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, sometimes it's not what it always seems to be. So it's the old adage of that, sort of an attraction to buy something at a lower price. And then actually at the back end, there is probably going to be other charges. And the good thing about the property side of it is that it should be all pretty much clear and upfront. Every document should be available, and before you sign on the dotted line, do check that what the landlords are charging, what the service companies are charging, and what the management fees are going to be. Because sometimes freeholders will appoint management companies, and the management companies are obviously there to make a living. So they also, for example, every time you have a copy of a document that you've lost or you missed, they'll turn around and say, well, that's another 45 or 50 pounds plus VAT that you need to pay me, send you a copy. So, get and keep copies and make sure you've got a right file, because ultimately you could be paying twice just because you didn't bother to save it in the first time. So it is very, very important to make sure that you cover yourself in those things.
Talking of due diligence, the Chancellor obviously made his financial statements a few days ago. And of course, there was much speculation about whether he would not extend the stamp duty holiday. And clearly, this has not been the case. And so as a result of that, there is a mad rush to bring the stamp duty benefits to those that are looking to buy as first-time buyers at the moment. So here, Joe, we're talking about the fact that it's now officially 15 weeks or 105 days after accepting an offer. So people are going to have to get their skates on if they're going to meet the deadline for the stamp duty holiday.
I think the problem on that point lies really in the system, number one. Number two, it lies within the people. I think when you start to sort of think, well, I've got all the time under the sun to do this, all of a sudden, time waits for nobody. The clock is going to continue to tick. And here we have that exact scenario where people have made offers and probably been sort of dithering whether they are or they're not going to. There's one of two things that's happened. Either they're not going to actually buy it and have wasted time for the seller, or they're stopping somebody else wanting to buy it because they may have found another buyer. So, and lastly, of course, the legal system. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, there is an abundance of excuses available by all bodies, and mostly because of searches and councils where staff have not been able to work from offices and been working remotely or from home. All of those things have just added to the problem and are adding to the excuses. However, it should not take, and it doesn't need to take, as long as it does. In 40 odd years of property, I've seen many transactions that have happened in a much, much shorter time. When they want to and they need to, they can do. The problem is this, that all of a sudden, everybody was sitting at home in the first furlough, sort of, hoping that that was the way things were. And all of a sudden, the stamp duty was announced, and hey, presto, the rush came. And as the rush came, they wasn't there to cope. And now there is a deadline for the 31st of March for people to complete, and they're going to. So my recommendation or my suggestion is really to get onto your lawyers, and if your lawyers are not actually able to act now, maybe find somebody else that can assist you in order to beat that stamp duty time. At the end of the day, it is money, and it's quite a lot of money that could help you going towards your first home. It's not what I'd like to say or do. However, if that's what you want to achieve, then you've got to be proactive and say, right, what can I do to try and make this happen for me? Otherwise, you are likely to miss the boat.
So it's essentially they're saying currently, due to the COVID situation, there's an extra 4 weeks on average being added to each transaction potentially. Do you think he was right, Joe, to not extend the stamp duty holiday? A lot of people, agents and property professionals, worried there's just going to be a big fall off the cliff at the end of the duty holiday.
I think if I was in the Chancellor's shoes, I probably would have not done anything differently at the moment. And that is primarily because if he had extended, it would only make people sort of sit back and think, well, this is not going to end forever. There has to be a time clock put on it. I'm fairly confident in my mind that come the 11th hour, we will probably get some form of extension. But had he extended that at this time, just before Christmas, then I think people would have taken their foot off the accelerator, especially the mortgage lending, the surveying, the legal side of it, and just sort of let it roll on. And there comes a point where you've got to make a business decision and say, well, actually, do I really want to continue this? And it may be that he might consider doing it till the end of next year. We don't know yet. I mean, you've got to bear in mind that the furlough is been extended to March. And so there must be some strategy in their mind. However, I think it may all coincide depending on what the next steps that they take going forward. But yes, obviously it's a shame that he hasn't extended it. And in an ideal world, we'd all like that to happen. But I think that everybody that needs to buy needs to take the full opportunity, take full advantage of what has been gifted under the current pandemic circumstances. I always continue to say, and will continue to say for the rest of my days, that there is no better investment and there's no better opportunity than buying your own home or investing in your next rental property. This is the time to do it. There are windows of opportunities that have been presented to you through the government, through the circumstances that we are all in this country. And, you just got to learn to take them and take them on board sooner rather than later.
Yes, I mean, that's a very good point to make, actually, isn't it? Because we've never had so much assistance in helping to buy a property. And that's obviously been brought on by the current situation.
Absolutely, and that's the point that I keep making. Look at the year. I mean, look at 2020. You start with a whole different ball game. But one thing is for sure, and that is that the government's plan is to continue to build. There is a shortage of housing. Their aim is to build themselves out of the problems that the pandemic has caused, and that has presented opportunities for people to think and say, right, I need to take this up now. Okay, lending might be a little tougher in the sense, but then the government's turned around and said, we're prepared to spend, give you 20% deposit in our Help to Buy scheme starting on the 16th of December. There's never been as many opportunities given. Now, if somebody then goes back and says, well, actually, I never had a chance in life, I didn't do that. Now, I understand there are going to be circumstances where people are not going to be able to do that. I mean, I'm not saying that is not the case, but I am saying that those that have the chance, those that have the support, those that have the support of their parents, the support of their circumstances, should take up whatever has been offered. I understand there's going to be masses of job losses, and I understand people are going to have other things to suffer. I can only isolate it to the business that I'm in, and that is to sell property. And all I'm saying is there's never been a better time in the current cycle to invest than there is now, be it a first-time home or be it an opportunity to invest in a property going forward, which, if you look back in the history, and I'm sure you were going to be sharing some other information with us shortly, Paul, but if you look back in history, I can only go by my own graph. my personal individual graph, and that is, when I sold my first house in 1980 or thereabouts at 34,000 pounds, those properties are currently selling for anything between 500 and 650,000 pounds. So that journey has only been a upward graph. It might have stagnated or stopped for a while in certain circumstances, but it's very rarely had a reverse gear. And that will be my benchmark to say that no matter what you do, when you can, where possible, invest.
You mentioned the economic situation, Joe, and obviously Rishi Sunak didn't pull any punches in his statement, and there's some pretty phenomenal figures being thrown around. Just taking a look at some of those here. 394 billion being borrowed next year. A level of employment increased to 1.62 million, up 300,000 on last year. Unemployment looked to hit 7.5% or 2.6 million out of work. Unemployment will come down to 4.4% by the end of 2024. The economy predicted to contract by 11.3%, which is the largest fall in output for more than 300 years, and looks set to grow by 5.5% next year and 6.6% in 2022. It's a worrying time, particularly for taking on financial responsibilities, Joe.
Yes, I think when you read the numbers as you have just read, Paul, there is no doubt in my mind that is a scary picture to think about. However, it is not a picture that we haven't been used to in our lifetime. Certainly in the journey that I've had, it's happened, I think 3, maybe 4 times now, of recession, ups and downs in life and circumstances. There is no such thing as a straight, narrow road in life. We're going to have some bends and curves and bumps, and that's where we are. That still doesn't take away the fact that one of the most stable and the most sound investments and the best investments that you've ever made is probably going to be property. Probably more so than anything else that you've actually looked at. Maybe that's because I'm passionate about it. Maybe because that's what I feel comfortable and confident in. But whether it's lying empty or it's not there, you touch it, see it, feel it, and look at it, and you can put your key through the front door and say this is mine, or at least a good percentage of it's mine, apart from the bank that owns the majority of the mortgage side of it. It is still the only best form of investment. Now, looking at those figures, they are scary numbers, and obviously the government has taken charge of all of those things. And one day down the line, we will all pay for it, and if we don't, our next generations will pay for it. However, if you take it down to the basics and run it as your own household, there are some things in your own household, some decisions you have to take, and some decisions you don't want to take, and some decisions that are not left for you to take. And this is where the government is. They've got their situation. They've been thrown this pandemic situation in the marketplace in 2020, and they've had to do certain things. And under the circumstances, I think they've done pretty well. I think that they've supported the businesses as much as they can, and I think they've supported the individuals as much as they can. It's now up to the individuals to turn around and say, well, actually, how do I make this the best for me? And that's the point that I would always say is what you can do for yourself. I have a firm belief, do the things that you can action. You cannot be responsible for what the government is doing and what their household is doing. You cannot be responsible for someone else's household, but you can be responsible for your own household and your own well-being and your own planning forward. And all I suggest is that take a look at the opportunities, see what's available, and maybe today's bad thing is tomorrow's good thing. So you need to start to sort of say, well, actually, is this the right opportunity for me to invest? Do I use this platform, this opportunity that has been presented to give me a chance to say, okay, I've had a bad time now, but maybe in the next couple of 3 years, that investment that I made will be increased in value. And subsequently, I can turn around and say, okay, I can refinance and pay off some of those things. So it's a good thing, but like I said, it's not for everybody. But my job here today is to tell you that these are my views. I'm not saying that I'm an expert in anything, but I'm an expert in the current state of life. And I can only tell you the experience of life that I've had over the last 40 years.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting you mention it because it's not a unique situation. If we're both old enough to remember the 1980s, late 79, 80, with 3 million unemployed, so we're not far off those kind of figures. And of course, we had the big crash in 2009-10. So these are not unique times, and I suppose also you could argue that the lenders are much more likely to have a dialogue with you now, and obviously there's protection in place in certain circumstances to make sure that you don't lose your investment.
Well, if you take 2007 as a point of crash, and the learning that we went through to get to where we are, obviously, nobody had planned for that at the time. But this time, I think, we're a little bit more cautious. Governments are more cautious. Banks are more cautious. And subsequently, that's given the opportunity for people to sort of say, okay, well, look, we are prepared to do something, but we're just a little cautious. That's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's important to be cautious, but equally, it's important to be bullish and be stronger in the plans that you have and the things that you want to do. And as they say, he who dares wins situation. And this is the sign. And a lot of the financial people, you took a look at people like the Warren Buffetts of the world. The time that they make the best money is when things are down, because they know that at some stage or another they will go back up again. And so if you take a slight leaf out of their book, or a page out of their book, and say, well, actually, these are learned people that have done this in year out for decades. They can't be that wrong. But like I said, don't always look at the others. Think about what you can do and what you can manage. And it's about you as an individual and your household. And if you've got the opportunity, then that's the time to take it.
Quite a big story this week. Obviously, this is the annual report from Zoopla on predictions for house prices and house transactions in 2021 to 2022. And just give you the headlines of this report, which came out this week. UK house prices have jumped 3.5%, which is the highest for almost 3 years. So, I mean, Joe, just starting with that for starters, that's quite an interesting figure, despite the fact that we've had such a financial meltdown due to the virus situation. House prices seem to be very healthy.
Well, Paul, I hate to say it, but it's only reiterating everything that I've stated about the investment, the opportunities that exist in property, because it is one of the only things that is safe. We use the term safe as houses, and here it is that states that. So, the pandemic has given people time to sit back and think about what they were doing. It's readjusted their lives. They've looked at it and said, what am I, what is this telling me? Do I want to be in the city? Do I want to move out? And so everything is done at the, the comfort of their sofa. They sit there and they look at the statistic, they look at the news, they listen to what the world is doing, and they are looking at what's going to happen. And hey presto, a average house price increase across the board. When things are tough elsewhere, property prices are steady and rising. And it goes back to my little own personal analysis of 40 years that it's only gone upwards. And in spite of what the current economic climate is and the problems that we have on our shoulders, here we have a situation that tells you that people are more comfortable in making sure that they can invest and move, and no better time. And your statistics there have shown that there has been a steady growth. Looking back at history, we've always built ourselves out. It's the safest way to build yourself out, creates jobs in the industry, and property, as I've continued to say, is a hub. And once that property is working, everything around it's working. You try and speak to a developer or a builder right now who isn't working, who's looking for sites. I know that I get calls from developers looking for sites to build because they know the demand. I know that there are first-time buyers looking to buy to build now to buy. And when you look at all of those things happening, look what's happening to the other industries that surround it. You know, people are refurbishing their properties, maybe having a new kitchen and bathroom put in, decorating, carpeting. You try and find a young, you know, a builder, a local builder who says, everyone's busy. They're busy because that's what the housing industry, that's what the property market does. It creates jobs and creates businesses. It is unfortunate that other things that are not directly and immediately related are suffering. Things like the high street situation with fashion industries and clothing industry and so forth, because all of those things have gone online and they become a luxury item. You know, if you can avoid buying a suit or a pair of trousers or a dress or whatever, then that's probably not the priority. Food is priority, making your bills payable a priority, and maybe making your home as comfortable as possible, it becomes priority.
Yes, so we're looking at these figures here, and the report suggests that over 2020 there will have been a 4% increase in property prices. But interestingly, Joe, this is going to slow to just 1% by the end of 2021.
Yes, and that again, it will slow on two counts. One, obviously, if the stamp duty is not extended, it will slow on that basis. People will take the foot off the pedal and go, okay, well, I've missed the opportunity. So, will I actually do I want to do this anymore? That will be one part of it. Second part of it, there will be job losses, and so people will be cautious about whether they want to make that step. And thirdly, it may not be such a bad thing to level off the enthusiasm and the interest that has happened, giving chance for people to catch up and say, right, well, I couldn't do it then, but maybe there's another window of opportunity. It will come back. It always has done. It will come back time and time again. And I think it's just a case of balancing things out. And 2021, 2022, you know, if we all had the crystal ball, we would probably give the lottery numbers out. But the answer is that these are all predictions. They're all based on statistics. It's the same scenario somebody says 300 years ago. To be perfectly honest with you, which one of us was actually around 300 years ago? Who the hell would know what those figures were 300 years ago? You know, we can clutch out numbers all the time, but the Chancellor said this has been the worst economy, you know, worst borrowing for over 300 years. 300 years ago, we weren't even a pimple in our mum and dad's eyes, let alone give you figures. So, you know, I think that step by step, take control of where you are now and look at the things that you can do and manage what you can. And if 2021 means house prices will slow, that's okay. It will give time for other people to catch up that missed the boat this time.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that the stamp duty holiday really has had a boost to the housing market this year, because house sales in 2020 are just going to be, in the end, 6% lower than they were in 2019. And given the financial impact of the virus, that's quite an achievement to just be 6% down, and that's largely driven by the stamp duty holiday.
Yes, stamp duty holiday, lending, having time to sit back and think. You know, I can't think in my mind where there has been a time in our lives that we've had as much time, Paul, to sit back and plan and structure and think. Now, you think about this. You know, when the pandemic and the first lockdown was down and people were on furlough, there were 2-3 months of time that they had on their hand that they never did. It was more people walking around the park looking at their health and exercising than I'd probably imagine, including myself, that I ever had time to do. And so when you look at the time that was given, all of that was given for people to readjust and think. It came at a price. I'm not saying that it's a great thing. It came at a price. We lost lots of families and friends, and lot of losses of life, unfortunate circumstances. All of those things happened, but they happened at a price, and they happened to give us time. And that time has given people to say, do I readjust my life? Do I rethink where I'm going to go with this? And what's the plan? And that's what's given that boost in the marketplace. Because with the pandemic, there's been a huge rush of people who decided they can now work from home. They actually don't need to be in the city. They don't need to be on the tube every day, breathing bad opportunities with other people. There's a whole barrage of things that people have actually had a chance to think. And yes, it was fueled by the stamp duty, but it was also fueled by the time that it gave us to think and say, you know what, I think maybe I don't need to be in the city. I can go and do this from outside in the country. And look at that. Look at the figures you shared last week with us. Look what happened in the north. Look at the demand of prices and the property that has surged into the north of England in order to balance. So there was lesser people, in the cities like London who have started, and then look at the outer villages and the nicer parts. And England is a beautiful place. It's got some amazing places. Every time I drive through a nice countryside and look at the quaintness and so forth, we have some wonderful places that we can move to live in. And I think that is the thing that people have taken advantage of.
Do you think ultimately, though, Joe, that with people looking to move out of towns and work from home more, that's going to lead to a levelling of prices, both north and south, but also in town and out of town? Do you think that's going to level things out over time?
I think it's wishful thinking, to be honest with you, that it will level things down out, but it's certainly going to go a long way in order for people to rethink their own structure. Not just people, companies have to rethink. They now know that they don't need to have their big city offices when they can afford to have people working from home. So there's a whole restructuring going on. And that's what happened. So if you look back, as you said, at our lives from the 80s onwards here, there've been so many adjustments that have happened. And here is another adjustment that is happening. Learning to understand what we can do online, what we can do remotely, what we can do sitting at home. Do we need to be on a bus and a train and a car all the time? Look what's going to happen in the future for cars and petrol and so forth. And all of those things are changes that are happening in our lives. And we just got to adjust to what is being offered at this moment in time. But yes, in terms of house prices, will they ever level out? I think potentially the gap will get shorter, but I don't think they'll ever level out because, London is a powerhouse, and the South does, offer some of the most amazing places in the country. And I've often said how blessed we are to be where we are, because a lot of people find it and find the things that we got. Even if you look at sporting events, sometimes I look at the sporting events and think, you got Wembley and you got Wimbledon and you got all those things which happen to be, down here, and there's lesser things up. Maybe if they move some of those things up, there might be a bit more of a move into people wanting to move to the north. But there are some amazing places in the north, and I think this pandemic has given a lot of people the opportunity to rethink and readjust where they need to be.
Yes, I mean, if you speak to city traders, for example, they'll tell you that times of immense change are where all the opportunities in life are. You can see the dramatic changes on the market, and that's where they make their opportunities. So it must be hard for people who are really suffering at the moment. Don't get me wrong, but there are always opportunities. It's the question, I suppose, of being able to identify what they are.
Yes, and that's what I say time and time again. I fully understand it's not for everybody. But when you look at the Warren Buffetts of the world, they sit back and they adjust accordingly. They look at the economies and say, this is the time for me to go and buy, or this is the time for the currencies to do, and so forth. So I think, if you take a leaf out of their books and just take a step back and re-look at your life, then the opportunities are there. Of course, Paul, there are going to be people that are really unfortunate. We're coming to a seasonal time when, if you look back at the clock, every year without fail, there's somebody who's going to lose their job, some company that's going to go close, some company. It's almost as if they sometimes wait till the end of the year or the beginning of the following to start to give us the bad news, at a time when, it's so important for families, so important to have that sort of unity and belonging, and no better and no worse time than 2020 in both sides. No worse because the pandemic has given people time to think, and no better time than the time that they've got. But unfortunately, It's going to allow people to have to really think about their pounds, shillings, and pences going forward, because there will be job losses, there will be companies that will close, there will be things that are going to administration, and they happen pretty much at the end of every year for some reason or another. And those people have to then readjust their plans. So looking back at 2019, I remember sitting there when Mr. Johnson won his election, and I thought 2020 was going to be something, considering we had all sorts of Brexit issues and so forth, something that we would look forward to. But how wrong was I? Not knowing that this pandemic was going to cause huge amounts of problem. And next year we'll have Brexit, and the year after we'll have a recession, and it will just continue. But you have to be resilient. You have to get up, dust yourself down, and start all over again. And it's just human nature.
Do you think Brexit will have an effect on the property market in the UK?
I think Brexit has had an effect on the property market in the UK in the last few years while it was going on. But if you look at your graph, it will show you that even through that resilient time of Brexit, people's views had not really changed. And it goes back, unfortunately, to my boring record of investment in property in the United Kingdom is key. There are 4 or 5 points that I will always point out, and I'll continue to say them. We are an island. We have London, which is one of the most attractive places in the entire world. We have a strong financial base. We can go up, go down, but we find it very tough to go out because green belt policy, rivers and waterways don't allow us to grow out too much. The supply is always limited here because we are an island. The demand is huge because everywhere in the world, somebody wants to come to the United Kingdom. There's never a queue at Dover to go to Calais, but there is always a queue at Calais to come to Dover. And if I just took some of those basics of my world, I don't think there'll ever be an issue in this country. We are very blessed to be where we are, and so invest, and buy.
And just the last couple of things I wanted to share with you from this very interesting report from Zupa, actually, their annual report. Just looking here, this is a graph that shows the price growth or fall since 2010, and in particular from December 2017. So obviously we're talking about difficult times over 2011 and then the massive growth into 2012, 13, 14. But what's interesting here is that prices started to sort of level off and fall from 2017, but now, as a result of presumably the incentives, and as you say, the lower lending, etc., lower lending rates, we're now back to 2017 levels, Joe.
Yeah, so you just using your graphs there, Paul, 2017, 2018 are probably best known as Brexit years. And there was the sort of the pause, if you want to call it that, when people are thinking, well, what happens? People were not sure whether they were going to stay here, whether they were going to get a passport to stay here. Do I leave? Is there going to be border problems? And Brexit create that. It's coming again, guys. It's not gone away. It's got to be dealt with. And that's probably part of the prediction of 2021 when prices will slow down. And people rethink their strategy depending on the outcome of whatever they decide to do with Brexit. And then of course came 2019 and 2020, and here we are in 2019, 2020 with a pandemic, a worldwide crisis that has affected millions and billions of people all over the world. I was in India in March, Paul, and I've been in India before, and India has a huge, ginormous population. Probably there are numbers of people there that have never actually been accounted for. I mean, it's sort of 1.3, 1.25 billion people there, and there's probably lots more. And it was like, when I've been there before, it's like ants. I mean, it's just, there's not a space, an inch or a millimeter available where there isn't a body or somebody doing something. And there it was, with not a single person on the road. I mean, that's the effect that I saw the pandemic had. I came back from India in March. Just fortunately, just before we had the lockdown, because of my late mother's passing away, I had to go and deal with the ashes. But what I found was that all of a sudden, this place that was buzzing around with people and like ants, just came to a halt. That's the effect the pandemic had on the world, let alone the world stage of India, which has got billions of people. So I hasten to think what happened elsewhere. The point I'm trying to make is that in spite of that, look what's happened in house prices in the United Kingdom for us. They have steadily grown and grown through, because our mindset has given us the view to rethink, readjust, and re-understand how we're going to deal with things going forward. And yes, in 2021, we will probably have a slight downturn because we've got the dreaded Brexit and the outcome of what is going to be the pandemic, and potentially some sort of vaccine that might come out. So there's always going to be something, always going to be something. There's never not the case that something doesn't come up. But what I'm going to say to everybody is, do the things that you can control, deal with your family, deal with the personal things you can deal with, because we're not in a position to deal with the larger things. And that's why we have governments. So let them do what they do and let us do what we do best. And that will be a result in what you can control.
And lastly, with
you're loving your graphs today, aren't you?
Oh, I know, I'm loving the graphs today, Joe, I have to say. But I just wanted to touch on this here because this is the timeline for this last year. And just looking a little bit of optimism when the general election was held at the end of last year. Of course, it's just almost a year away since the election. There was a little bit of a surge of confidence, shall we say. Then, of course, the pandemic, as you can see, had the effect on the market there in terms of demand and also sales agreed. But then, of course, the market reopened in May and immediately shot up. And then, of course, we got the announcement of the stamp duty holiday. And as a result of that, demand is 34% higher than last year. So it really has been a master stroke bringing in these incentives.
Yes, and again, the government has looked at what makes it work. They don't have to be honest with you, Paul, the government, all successive government have had one tool that they have absolutely used to their full advantage, and that is the housing market. There have been times when they put interest rates up so high because the demand was so good, they wanted to put a brake on it. So they whacked the interest rates up. When the market is not good, what they do is they reduce the interest rate and people start saying, okay, look, now's a good time for me to buy. They use the housing market like a yo-yo, just a bit like your graph there, ups and down, and it suits them. What people don't understand is that the government play with them all the time. But you got to understand, as the viewers and people interested in the property markets, you should also reverse the situation, utilize the opportunities that are thrown to you in the best effect, the best possible way. And in this case, stamp duty has been thrown. So those that are taking advantage, take advantage. 20% towards your purchase outside and 40% towards your purchase inside as of the 16th of December under the Help to Buy scheme. Take advantage. Yes, you may miss the stamp duty holiday, but you may get a benefit elsewhere. There's always going to be some opportunities that has been presented to give that window for you.
We are actually out of time, Joe. Believe it or not, the time
already
seems to rush away. I know we say it every week, but we can sit and talk about succession planning if you wish to do so, if you'd like to stay on. And I'm sure people would be fascinated to hear, or we can leave that to next week. What would you like to do?
Well, I think what we need to do is just touch on that for a very quick minute. And that is that there are windows of opportunity that are presented. And in this case, we have success in people investing and buying. And a subject that I think that we will cover obviously now next week properly is succession planning. People should think about, the money that they made. The Chancellor didn't extend the capital gains tax. And there might be a window for everybody to look at that and think, how am I going to be protected going forward, rather than sitting back and just thinking, oh, well, it's okay. So, yeah, I mean, let's bring that subject on as a big subject. I know you've thoroughly enjoyed your graphs, Paul, and you put me to the test. You put me through the test of every possible graph. I'm hoping that I've succeeded in all your questions and answers on that. But maybe lesser graphs next time to beat me up with. And then
Oh, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can do without my graphs. Really,
I kind of felt that might be the thing. But anyway, I'll continue to do my best. And I think that succession planning is something that we want to look at. We've got Russell Brara hopefully joining us next week as well. He has been pioneering the Asian Jewish Network, which I think is, again, a community situation. And I think it's really good to see how other communities interact and how they're looking at it. It'd be good to get a feedback from him. We have a mortgage broker coming on board, hopefully in the next couple of weeks as well. And of course, Lalji will be back with us from Solaria to talk about other planning scenarios. So plenty of stuff to go just before we break up for the festive season. But we might just annoy you over Christmas.
Well, Joe, sage advice as always. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution this week. And so sorry about all the graphs, but I just thought it was quite fascinating to look at how the market has behaved in such a volatile time. Thank you to everyone for watching as well this week. Sorry, Joe.
That is very funky. I really enjoyed those.
So thank you everyone for watching this week. I hope you enjoyed it and found that of use. Of course, we will have Russell Bahar with us next week from the Asian Jewish Network. Looking forward to meeting him and having a conversation in the round with the three of us. Looking forward to that very much indeed. Thank you very much once again, and we'll see you next Sunday at 10 o'clock.
Thank you.